Hello guys, welcome to video lesson on language and linguistics. Now, here we have an introduction to what is linguistics. The word linguistics has been derived from the Latin words lingua, which means tongue, and istics, which means knowledge or science. Etymologically, linguistics is the scientific study of language, but it is not the study of one particular language, but of human language in general. Now, it studies language as a universal and recognizable part of human behavior. It attempts to describe and analyze language. So you need to understand that linguistics is a science, is a scientific study of language which attempts to describe and analyze language. So linguistics is that science which studies the origin, organization, nature, and development of language descriptively, historically, comparatively, and explicitly. And linguistics is the branch of language which formulates the general rules related to language. So linguistics is therefore a science that describes and classifies languages. Now, the person who studies scientifically a language is called a linguist. And now, what does the linguist does? A linguist identifies and describes the units and patterns of the sound system, the words and morphemes, and the phrases and sentences, that is the structure of languages, completely, accurately, and economically as possible. How do you produce language? You produce sounds. You need somebody to study the sounds that you produce, you articulate, and these sounds, they join together to form words, and then they have some meanings for that. You ascribe meanings and impressions to that particular words, and words are joined together to form sentences. So this way sound units grow in size and they become words, sentences, phrases, clauses, and ultimately connected speeches or conversation. So a linguist is a person who studies these scientifically. Now, what is the aim of linguistics? Linguistics has got two major aims. One is to study the nature of language and establish a theory of language, just like any other realm, just like any other branches of knowledge. Language has got to have a scientific, a systematic underlying theory or rule which establishes or which studies, describes, and analyzes its nature and its elements. Elements in the sense sounds, words, sentences, and so on. So linguistics has to describe a language in all languages by applying this theory which has been established. So a linguist has to form, or linguistics has to study the nature of language. Each community, each section of the society, each geographical area has its own languages. You have already understood, you have already comprehended the differences between human communication and animal communication. We have seen several characteristic features of language, human language. Language is only used by human beings, not animals. So in that case, you have to describe, understand, and comprehend the nature of human language. And then you have got to prescribe or establish certain theories for that, scientifically and systematically analyzing it. And then we have to, or the linguist or linguistics has to describe every languages based or on the grounds of this theory which has been established by systematically analyzing the nature of language. So we can conclude by saying that linguistics is the science of language, and linguistics is a systematic study of language, and the field of linguistics is concerned with the study of human language. Why? Because language is something used for exclusive for human beings, and it as a universal part of human behavior and thinking. Now, what actually linguistics is? Studying, analyzing, describing, and scientifically defining language. We have already seen that. And how do linguists studies language, or on what all forms, the different forms in which, or the different levels in which a language is being described and analyzed? Three ways, three different ways or levels on which a language is dismantled or broken down and learned. That is, languages studied. A linguist scientifically and systematically studies language on the basis of its sound, the sound units, the sound elements which is produced by human beings. This comes under the branch of what you call phonetics and phonology. And then linguistics studies language on the basis of its structure, where you have words and sentences and their arrangement. This falls under the branch of what you call morphology and syntax. And then language is being studied on the basis of the grounds of meaning. We have thousands and thousands of words in every language. Yes, and each words are having their own meanings. Okay, and this falls, or this branch of learning comes under what you call semantics and pragmatics. You have semantics as well as pragmatics. They are different. So keep in mind one thing, that language is studied or described in depth on three different levels. That is, on the level of its sound, on the level of its structure, and the level of its meaning. Yeah. Now here, have a look at this circles, beautiful colors of circles. So this shows the basic core circle where you can see speech sounds, which is what you call phonetics. And then you have speech sounds. They are named as phonemes, describing, analyzing, and systematically learning or describing the speech sounds as phonemes. This comes under phonology. And then phonemes join together and they form speech units or sound units, basic, minimal, small units of sound which has got some meaning to it. This is being studied under morphology. And then comes the next circle where you have phrases and sentences. They're growing in size. Yeah, they are accelerating in size. And this is studied under the branch of what you call syntax. And then comes the literal meaning of phrases and sentences. The words, sentences, and clauses. A conversational speech is given meaning. Every word, every sentence, every phrase has got its own meaning. And this is learned under semantics. And then comes the next circle or next level where you have the sentences, phrases, or clauses or paragraphs. They have got a contextual meaning. You use language in school. It's academic language. You use language at home. It's informal language. You use language with your friends, where you have friendly talks, where you use lovable words, endearing words. You are very informal. You joke. You are humorous and such things. You have your own words. You have your own choice of words. Depending or based on the different situations and circumstances, you change your tone, style, and diction. Diction means words, choice of words. So meaning of your speech, meaning of your discourse based on its context or circumstances. That comes under pragmatics. Now, finally, you have something called discourse. Okay, discourse is any piece of language which is spoken or written. I'm speaking to you. I'm giving you a video lecture and you're listening to me. This is a discourse. You listen to this and you'll be writing something. You'll be jotting down important points. And whatever you have analyzed, whatever you have heard and listened to in my video lesson, you will be documenting it. And that is also discourse, because language is being written. So language has got spoken form as well as written form, and this falls under discourse. Anything you listen to, anything you work on, anything you write is your text. So here, by linguistic levels, it is meant the levels of language structure. And there is a considerable difference among the linguisticians, among the number and terminology of linguistic levels. Language is studied at different levels, just like a small kid or child dismantles a big building or a big structure that he makes when he plays with building blocks. You can imagine a baby or a tiny toddler who is playing with building blocks, and he makes a big building, or he makes some shapes or some structures, and he shows it to you. Yes, of course, you congratulate him, you applaud him, and then finally he just pushes it off, and the whole thing dismantles. The building blocks come down and all the blocks, they fall apart. Similarly, you, a linguist or a philologist, I shall explain and describe the word, what do you mean by philology and philologist shortly. So a linguist or a philologist actually dismantles and he breaks up the language and our actual conversation into tiny building blocks, and finally he breaks and come down, and he reaches the basic minimal unit, and it is the speech sound. So the sounds articulated by human beings. So here you have phonetics and phonology, which studies, describes, and analyzes systematically and scientifically all the sounds, all the speech sounds produced by human beings, and it describes and establishes theories for the system of sounds. And then you have morphology, where form the different words, the phonemes and the speech sounds that join together to form words, and this is called the morphology, the morphological studies. And then you have syntax, where clauses and sentences, the bigger versions of these sound units, are being learned and described. And then comes semantics, where you deal with the meanings of various kinds. And finally, pragmatics, where the human beings, the native, the users of a language community, they use language for actual purpose, that's a conversational purpose and interaction. Yes, so here you can see the level, the increasing level. Phonetics, and then comes phonology, which is followed by morphology, and then comes syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. So the sound unit is increasing. It's elevating, the size, the magnitude is elevating. You can see it. Yes. Now, what is philology? It's a term you need to know as you are learning linguistics and basic concepts of linguistics. Philology is the study of language in oral and written historical sources. It is the intersection of textual criticism, literary criticism, history, and linguistics. It's study of old languages. It's a study of old texts. In simple words, you can say that philology was the term used for linguistics in the past. Okay, it's defined as the study of a literary text as well as oral and written records, the establishment of their authenticity, where do they come from, their original form, and the determination of their meaning, all these things. And a person who studies, who pursues this kind of study, is known as a philologist. Yes, in older usage, especially British, philology is more general, covering comparative and historical linguistics. Now, the term is derived from Greek words, where you have the philos means love or affection or beloved, dear friend. And then you have the word logos, which means word or articulation or reason. So in fact, you can say that philology means as a love of learning and literature, of course. Philology comprises linguistics and literary criticism and linguistics study of a language system and its structure. So here you just have you can juxtapose the word philology and linguistics. Of course, quite naturally, philology being the old term which is used to describe linguistics, and linguistics is the modern version of philology. But then you have a slight variation where philology comprises linguistics and comparative literature and textual criticism and literary criticism and anything related to language used in history, everything, all these things. Within linguistics means it's the study of language system, sounds, sound units, words, phrases, sentences, etc., and its structure. Now, as scholars and learners of linguistics and language, this is a term which you have to use it quite often. What is a structure? Speaking operates only on a language state, and the changes that intervene between states have no place in either state. What do you mean by a structure? Structure means your word. It's a structure. A sentence. It's a structure. Anything as scholars of linguistic scholars and linguistic learners, whatever they work on is the structure. Maybe a sign, maybe a symbol, maybe an image, maybe a sound unit like p, b, m, n. Anything, all these are structures. So far, language users and linguistic learners quite often use this term structure. Okay. Now, we are moving on to the pioneers and important linguists who have contributed considerably to what we are learning now as linguistics and modern linguistics. Now, here we have Ferdinand de Saussure, and a quote by him. It's a beautiful quote which you can read. Yes. Saussure has been often hailed as father of linguistics and the developer of sign theory. We shall look at sign theory shortly. Now, here you have a cover page and the initial pages of his phenomenal work, Cours de Linguistique Générale, or what you call as Course in General Linguistics in English. Now, he is a Swiss linguist. It's a Saussure, the Ferdinand de Saussure. He's a Swiss linguist who lived in the later part of the 19th century, whom you can associate with the idea of language as a system of signs. So in simple terms, Saussure calls linguistics or language as a system of signs, symbols. And his views on language were published posthumously from several lectures and notes by his students. That is, his course in general linguistics is a book summarizing his lectures and his notes and his talks at the University of Geneva from 1906 to 1911, where he explained the relationship between speech and evolution of language, investigating language as a structured system of signs. So you keep in mind that to Saussure, to Ferdinand de Saussure, the Swiss linguist, who is often called as the father of linguistics, language is a structured system of signs. Saussure's landmark, important and significant contribution to linguistics is his theory of signs. Now he defines or he introduces language as a structured system of signs. And what is that? He defines everything, or he perceived a linguistic unit as a double entity. Anything and everything is described or defined by Saussure as in binary. He defines it as binary. What do you mean by binary? Dual, two. Yes. He describes every unit, every structure as a double entity. For example, he calls or he says that language consists of signs. And what is a sign? A sign is a combination, a mixture of two things: the signifier and the signified. You can see it, the visual diagrammatic representation of a sign. Anything, any sign, any word, or any speech sound, or any basic unit of sound is a sign, which consists of two parts: the signified and the signifier. What is the signified? It's a meaning, and signifier is the form. These two are intimately linked, and each triggers the other. So, here it is important to know that Saussure perceived a linguistic unit in terms of two or dual or double entity. Now, according to him, the linguistic unit is a combination of a sound image and a concept or meaning. The sound image is the form, and that is the signifier. The concept or meaning, that is which is being implied or conveyed, and that is the signified. So from Saussure's point of view, the concepts of signifier and signified are not two different entities. They are two different ways to look at and describe language. And signifier and signified are inseparably one. They triggers each other, each triggers the other. Now, with this theory, he was actually rejecting the Western tradition that treats language like an entity or an instrument or a tool. So for him, language is creative action, not simply a thing. So that is Saussure's theory of sign. So here you can see an example which I've given. Tree, the word, it's a form. You write T-R-E-E, and you have got three sounds there: T-R-E, T-R-E. Three sound units together form something what you write as T-R-E-E. You call it tree. Okay, that is the form, that is the structure, that is the sound image, and that is the signifier. And when I say tree, something comes into your mind, something comes into your brains. There is a mental image which you see below that. Something with green leaves and a wooden bark, and which is tall, its stem is very hardy, and which is very wide. Something from which you get wood. All these interpretations, all these associations and impressions come to your mind when I say tree. And all these things which are conveyed or implied to the listener or to the language user is what you call the signified. Yes. So when I say apple, you have something called APPLE. And something gets a mental image is brought to your mind. It's a fruit which is very sweet. It has got a red or a green or a yellow peel, and it has got a fleshy body which your teeth bites into and gives you vitamins and minerals. It's a wonderful fruit. All these things come to your mind, and that's a signified. So here Saussure describes a sign as a combination, as a single unit made with two elements, the signifier and the signified. Another important name who has triggered and unleashed new paradigms and shifts in modern linguistics, Noam Chomsky. Chomsky, the American linguist, philosopher, cognitive scientist, historian, social critic, and political activist, sometimes is also called the father of modern linguistics. Chomsky is also a major figure in analytic philosophy and one of the founders of the field of cognitive science. All these things will be explained in another video lesson which is exclusively for Noam Chomsky. Now, he holds a joint important as he holds a joint appointment as Institute Professor at Emeritus at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. He works there as an Institute Professor, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and is, of course, a laureate professor at the University of Arizona. An author of more than 100 books on topics such as linguistics, war, politics, and mass media. Ideologically, he aligns or he associates himself with anarcho syndicalism and libertarian socialism. All these things, how he's a cognitive scientist, and what are the details of Chomsky as a political activist, what is his analytic philosophy, what do you mean by cognitive science, and how you align or you attribute Noam Chomsky with anarcho syndicalism and libertarian socialism. All these for your general knowledge, I shall explain in the next upcoming video. Yes. Yes. Look at the landmark work of Chomsky, Syntactic Structures, which played a major role in remodeling the study of language. You can have a good look at syntactic structures. And another important phenomenal works by Chomsky. So, from 1958 to 1959, Chomsky was a National Science Foundation Fellow at the Institute for Advanced Study, and he created or co-created, you can say that it's the credit of creating universal grammar and the generative grammar theory and the Chomsky hierarchy and the logical structure of linguistic theory and the minimalist program. All these things, the credit goes to his fellow partner too, that is Charles Sanders Peirce, whom we shall see in the upcoming video lessons. So here you can have a look at the important and significant revolutionary works by Chomsky, his universal grammar. So he has contributed or co-contributed the theories of a universal grammar and generative grammar theory, and his hierarchy and minimalist program to English linguistics or language linguistics. And he has written another important classic work here on language, where he talks about the classic works of language and the responsibility and reflections on language. This is the cover page of On Language. One important work among his hundreds of books. Yeah. Other important linguistics whom you're meeting right now is Edward Sapir, an American anthropologist, linguist, who is widely considered to be one of the most important figures in the early development of the discipline of linguistics. Yes, with his linguistic background, Sapir became the one student of Bosch to develop most completely the relationship between linguistics and anthropology. Being a linguist as well as an anthropologist linguist. Who is an anthropologist? You know that a person, a scientific person who scientifically studies human beings and human nature and human culture, all these things, is an anthropologist. So here, Sapir's contribution relies basically on the relationship between linguistics and anthropology. He studies the ways in which language and culture influenced each other. So he is describing things in terms or in the wake of culture. And he was interested in the relationship between linguistic differences and differences in cultural worldviews. Okay. Now this is his phenomenal work, Language. It's an introduction to the study of speech. Now, Sapir, he believes in the connections between language, thinking, and culture because he gives predominance to culture, how language operates with in connection or in association with the society and the culture which operates within society. So he is explaining or making the ability to communicate language is being used, or the ability of language to communicate clearly is essential. And it is through language that culture operates, or culture is being transported or carried from one particular family to another, one particular group to another, or one particular community to another. So there is some sort of a cultural movement, a cultural interaction or give and take policy takes place. And he believed that language also shapes an individual's person. That is, language influences our perception of the world and of our behavior. So in order to understand the person, you need to understand the history of their language, which tells you the history of their culture. So 3 or 4 important terms which you need to connect to Edward Sapir is language, human beings, culture, and society. So he is taking it to a different level. Unlike what we have seen with Chomsky and Saussure, he is connecting anthropology, that is human behavior, individual behavior, character, and attitude, and a history of the language that they have been using. And all these histories tell you about the culture. So there is some sort of a play or interaction between the language that a person uses and his culture. So that is it. And his major contribution to linguistics is that his classification of indigenous languages of America, the different Englishes, the different indigenous varieties of Englishes used in America, especially the different languages in America, upon which he elaborated for most of his professional life and played an important role in developing the modern concept of phoneme. So he has done thorough and profound studies and analysis in the concept of the phoneme, greatly advancing the understanding of phonology. So here goes a wonderful quote by Edward Sapir, which adds to your repertoire. Yes, the next person you are meeting is an American linguist who led to the development of structural linguistics. Please keep focus on that word. I'm emphasizing on that. Structural linguistics in the United States during the 1930s and the 1940s. Now, his influential textbook, Language, published in 1933, presented a comprehensive description of American structural linguistics. Please, I'm highlighting, I'm revalidating or emphasizing the important words attached to this American linguist. That is American structural linguistics. So his attempts and strategies to describe and establish a comprehensive description of American structural linguistics, and he made significant contributions to Indo-European historical linguistics, a description of Austronesian languages, and the description of languages of the Algonquian family. We are talking about none other than Leonard Bloomfield. Yes. You can see Leonard Bloomfield, who contributed to the development of structural linguistics in the 1930s and 1940s. His phenomenal work, Language, published in 1933. And his comprehensive description on American structural linguistics. Bloomfield's approach to linguistics was characterized by its emphasis on the scientific basis of linguistics, and his adherence he sticks on to. He is very particular to behaviorism, especially in his later work, and emphasis on formal procedures for the analysis of linguistic data. So the influence of Bloomfieldian structural linguistics declined in the late 1950s and 1960s as the theory of generative grammar developed by Chomsky. So Bloomfield was actually followed by Noam Chomsky, whom we have already seen. And Bloomfield, according to him, language is a descriptive science. That is, it describes what people use. The native speakers, the speakers of a language, they are the natives of a language community. A language or linguistics should pose theories and rules which people use. You shouldn't prescribe. You shouldn't force. Language is not something which has to be coerced or forced to be used. And the primary form, the initial form of language is, of course, spoken. You speak language. Every literature, every text, every story, every song, every poem is first spoken, is orally transmitted. Okay, culture, ballads, songs, literature, stories, everything has got its initial form. Its primary form is, of course, spoken. And then a speech comes first, and then later on it's written. Not every language has got a written form. Some languages are there in this world that is described or that operates on a spoken level, on a verbal level. And language, of course, is a system where there are different systems. There are myriads and multitudes of tiny, small subsystems. And altogether, language forms a massive, huge, big network of systems. And language should be based on observable samples. That is, it's an observable speech, not knowledge. It is there. It should have a practical usage. You know language, it is there in you, but then you're not using. You know a song, the song is there within you, but you're not articulating, you're not singing, you're not rendering. You know the 26 alphabets of language from A to Z, but you're not using language, or you are not saying it, you're not articulating it, you're not rendering it by your vocal organs, or you are not producing it with your speech organs, you're not uttering it with your mouth. And then it is not language. And he says that it should be observable speech. You have to see it, feel it, and experience it. Language has to be physical and concrete. So these are the contributions by Bloomfield, which was later on advanced and taken on to a different level of generative grammar by Noam Chomsky. So far we have seen what linguistics is, the purpose of linguistics, what are the different levels, the linguistic levels on which language is scientifically and systematically learned. And we have got acquaintance with several important, phenomenal linguists who has contributed so much beyond measures into what we call today as linguistics. So here it's of course seemed to be a bit hard not to crack, but then if you are if you're exploring it with interest, and if you can see the brighter side of this, it's a very much interesting human science, one of the human science, and one of the most interesting and thrilling and exciting human sciences, as said or quoted by Samuel R. Delany. So here I conclude with this video lesson, where you have seen the important linguists and linguistics as a science, as a scientific study of language. Thank you for watching this video lesson, and have a nice day. See you in the next video lesson.